Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you, Reverend Pat, for asking me to preach today. Even at kind of short notice for me. I don't know what I was thinking to say yes. Well, I was thinking, yes, Reverend Pat, yes, to your will and to your way. Like the song. And I already told everyone the last time I was here how much I really do like thinking hard about the sermons. Except that the particular gospel reading for today is partly about how thinking hard isn't the best way to understand God, which is humbling for me, since thinking is mostly how I do try to understand. But being humbled is good, I think, and closer to being able to know God. Although there may be a difference between having a humble spirit and being humbled, which is more about having to face one's lack of humility. I'm just trying to locate myself along the humility spectrum. I think I may need work, which is humbling. Let me read the verses from Matthew. At that time Jesus said, I thank you, O God, sovereign of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent, and have revealed them to little children. Yes, O God, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my parent, and no one knows the child of God except the parent, and no one knows the parent except the child of God, and anyone to whom the child chooses to reveal God. Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. To begin, it feels important to add context to what Jesus is saying. Today's verses come at the end of Matthew chapter 11, but earlier in the chapter, Jesus talks about how, after having traveled through Galilee, performing signs and wonders, healing the sick and proclaiming good news to the poor, still the people are unbelieving and unrepentant, or unchanged, still stuck in their hierarchical understanding of worthiness and access to God. He's frustrated about this and also sorrowful, saying woe to them. Something that's occurring to me now, which I haven't fully processed before, is that what the people aren't able to accept about Jesus' miracles, what they aren't able to be amazed by or believe in as evidence of God's loving power, is that this loving power is being extended first and foremost to those whom society has cast out as unclean. That it's being used to include the fringe people they've considered unworthy, the ones they've thought of as condemned by God, not blessed, which to them conflicts with their sense of themselves as the worthy blessed ones. I think I've understood this more in terms of the religious leaders of the day. How Jesus' message of God's inclusive love was threatening to their elevated status as being in privileged communion with God. But now I'm suddenly seeing this as a much more widespread response, that Jesus is shunned maybe even by the majority, not just the elite leadership, but the everyday people who want to retain their sliver of privilege, however small. I think I'm seeing more clearly what Jesus is up against. I don't know how I haven't seen this before, or haven't seen it as being the crux of things. Addressing inequity, healing the sick, and lifting up the poor isn't just a good thing that a loving God can do. It's the whole point. And the resistance to it is the exact same resistance that exists today. The fear of having something taken away. That if everyone has enough, then it means there'll be less for the right ones. If everyone is important to God, then it means they aren't especially important. Jesus is trying to dismantle an oppressive hierarchy for the benefit of all, but they can only see it as displacement of them, not the creation of a loving commonwealth, but an infringement on their territory. In the passage from Matthew, when Jesus praises God for having hidden these things from the wise and intelligent, and revealed them to little children, adding, yes, O God, for such was your gracious will. It feels as if he's expressing a revelation, or that he's now affirming his complete awareness of and admiration for God's intent, having experienced the prideful narrowness of intelligent people clinging to the status quo, rejecting that God would give authority to someone such as Jesus to let the riffraff in. What is it about children, though, that they would be more receptive to the truth of God? Little children, Jesus says. I'm thinking of toddler-sized ones that are kind of like puppies. They have wonder and curiosity and openness. Their neural pathways aren't deeply etched. They aren't set in their ways. They're easily delighted and also easily distressed, but greatly responsive to offerings of comfort in that case. We call them resilient. They don't harbor resentments. They haven't yet been indoctrinated into any particular worldview that would lead them to consider themselves superior, or to consider someone as other, or lesser, or unworthy. They don't even have a language for this, and don't see themselves as belonging to a certain societal level, whether lowly or elevated, although their own position in society is a lowly one, being without rights and at the mercy of whomever is meant to care for them, which requires that they trust they'll be provided for, which I think is the most important thing. Trust in God as provider of all. That and a humble spirit, which in this case of a little child would be the absence of ingrained insecurities or animosities or grandiose conceits. Something I found interesting in looking up the word humility was a Wikipedia entry that offered a more recent psychological and philosophical definition than the 1998 Oxford Dictionary's description as not being prideful or having a low opinion of oneself. The Oxford English Dictionary website actually has a disclaimer that their definition is undergoing a revision and isn't yet final. The newer definition outlined on Wikipedia emphasizes having an accurate opinion of oneself and proper sense of self-regard, which includes openness, broad-mindedness, and a non-imposing mentality, meaning, I think, remaining teachable. Maybe the handicap of the wise and learned, the reason God's truths are hidden from them, is that they think they already know. Humility doesn't presume to know. Jesus says, "All things have been handed over to me by my parent, and no one knows the child of God except the parent, and no one knows the parent except the child of God, and anyone to whom the child chooses to reveal God," which establishes Jesus' authority to heal and minister to those who are outcast, but also seems to describe something esoteric or belonging to a secret society, something exclusionary, as if Jesus will only be inviting chosen people to peek behind the curtain. In researching what others may have said about this statement, I came across 3 instances of pastors, I think conservative ones, but not in the extreme, who focused on the exclusionary aspect as being the core meaning, that only a select few are the chosen ones who get to know God, and that this is an aspect of the mystery of God, that some will be chosen when others aren't. They seem to be saying that it's an expression of humility, the acknowledgement that being chosen is mysteriously arbitrary, not something earned but simply given. They also seem to consider themselves among the chosen ones, humbly adding, "God only knows why." I'm sorry I'm making fun of them, but I don't accept their interpretation. I don't believe that Jesus ever excludes anyone. I think instead that his esoteric statement is a reaction to the Galilean people having largely rejected his teachings, that it's a way of explaining the rejection. Because although his invitation to better know God is open to everyone, not everyone is able or willing to accept it. Those he chooses are those who agree to be chosen, the willing ones. And if all of this is about creating an equitable world, a commonwealth, then the willingness needs to include the relinquishing of status and privilege, even to the point of giving away possessions and tearing down fences that keep others out. The willingness is an embrace of vulnerability, the powerless, possessionless, armorless vulnerability of a little child. But little children are naturally vulnerable. They have no other way to be. For a grown person who's built up defenses, it requires a leap of faith. The issue, I think, is whether or not one can believe in the Commonwealth as the optimal way for the world to be. Trusting God is trusting that the Commonwealth, the beloved community, is God's plan and hope for the world, and that it's the design that will best support everyone's well-being and fullness of life. Everyone will flourish. Everyone will love it. It asks for our repentance, though. It needs us to change. It needs us to stop hoarding resources for ourselves and start sharing. It needs us to love our neighbors as ourselves, to welcome the stranger, to include everyone, to recognize each other as siblings. The example Jesus provides is that we start at the margins, because as much as Jesus' message of God's abiding love is meant for everyone, he clearly pays special attention to those who are outcast. He chooses them as his friends. He welcomes them and heals them and makes a place for them in community. They are his people, the humble. His human aspect identifies as one of them. In the reading from Zechariah, which is the prophecy of the Messiah's entry into Jerusalem, Jesus is described as humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. It isn't even a full-size donkey. He's literally lowering himself, breaking down the hierarchy by bringing God to eye level. He's using his status as God's beloved child, the prophesied Messiah, to mingle instead of look down on. He's providing divine representation for those deemed unworthy of God's attention, because they're the vulnerable ones, the ones most naturally open to God's abiding love. Maybe their openness to receiving God's love is what it means to know God, because their healing and inclusion are reliant on their faith, their belief in the healing power of God's love. Their healed selves are the embodiments of it. I think of the Galilean people's rejection of this, or lack of inspired understanding, as being akin to certain right-wing responses to events like Pride Month or other movements meant to uplift oppressed groups of people. How the privileged people can feel slighted and want to know when straight people's month is going to be. Or respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter, or more pointedly, Blue Lives Matter. How when loving attention is focused on others, they feel robbed of what they believe belongs to them. They don't recognize or admit to or feel moved by the need to give loving attention to those who've seldom received it. I think of the explanations required, like, yes, all lives do matter. We're just lifting up the black ones right now. Or Straight People's Month is every month of the year. We're celebrating with queer people now. Or sometimes it's your turn to be an ally and not the centered person. But then they might say a snarky thing back if this is a conversation that happens online. And then it will quickly devolve into cussing and name-calling. Because believing in the goodness of the Commonwealth seems to be really hard for some people. It seems to look to them like losing something instead of gaining. And the truth is that they will need to forfeit something, their privilege, for others to be brought into the fold. But the deeper truth, I believe, is that this will be wondrously enriching for both the outcast ones and the privileged ones. The privileged ones just can't seem to be convinced of this. I don't even know that we're fully convinced, because we have privilege to forfeit too. We have parts of us that are the outcast ones, but also parts that need to be allies to those who are more outcast. What does it even look like to bring everyone to equal footing? I think of Jesus telling people to give all their possessions to the poor and follow him. What if he means this literally? Who among us is willing then? The risk of it feels immense, because the world isn't set up for it. Everything is transactional in this world. If we didn't have something material to contribute, would we become a burden to society instead of trailblazers? Or would it be like being a nun or a monk? I do think there'd be enough to go around if all of us pooled our resources and shared, if we all took care of the earth and let it be its fruitful self, if we all took care of the animals too. I don't think we'll be eating each other anymore in the Commonwealth. But everyone will need to agree to do all of this together, or at least a large number of people will need to agree. But will it be like a commune? Will it get weird? Will we have to be naked? Maybe we're meant to point ourselves toward it. Not so much a leap of faith, it's kind of an inching forward. Kind of like the way Francis says I go into the ocean. I told you before about our yearly trip to Florida. We take our bikes on a train from here to Jacksonville, then ride from Jacksonville to Key West and partway back up. We're going again in about a week. Pray for us. We ride directly past the oceanside entrance of Mar-a-Lago. But when we swim in the ocean, Francis has a way of just marching right in and diving into the first wave. My way is to kind of tiptoe in and hold my arms over my head and jump up when a wave comes so I don't get too wet. I'm scared of the cold water, not the waves. I'm actually a very good body surfer, I think. But even though Frances tells me it's not at all too cold once you've submerged, and even though I already partly believe her, having gone through the process numerous times, I still tiptoe in case it's just colder this time. But I do dive in eventually, partly because of her encouragement, and partly because of my own desire to have the full ocean experience, which for me is body surfing. I know how to fit myself into the waves in the same way that I know how to fit myself into the air currents when I fly in my dreams. I let the waves carry me right to the shore and grind me into the sand. I get burn marks. Jesus makes the case for taking a leap of faith in this way, saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Like saying, it isn't hard, I'm right here to show you. It won't be too cold when you dive in. He's calling to all who are weary and burdened, which does seem to address the oppressed of the world in particular, as he is wont to do, although everyone is weary and burdened in some way. Everyone can make the leap. The interesting part is that there's still a burden in this promise of rest for our souls. There's a yoke, a task, a job to be done, but an easy and light one, Jesus says, and one he's showing us how to do and is doing with us, yoked together and moving forward. It's work, but it's more than fulfilling. It's fun, our favorite thing we get to do, to practice love, and pair it up with a teacher we most admire. We're plowing together, or something like plowing, something like making the ground ready for when we'll be planting the most amazing things. Maybe we don't know exactly what will grow, but it will all be sustaining and amazing, and each of us can choose to become gentle and humble in heart, and each of us can evolve in astonishing ways we can't even imagine. Not into immortal hybrid AI creatures on sterile spaceships to Mars, but something else, maybe like new kinds of beings who love everyone and are loved by everyone in the most open and vulnerable and honest and inspiring and so dearly earnest and profoundly affecting ways that thrill us and soothe us and make us laugh out loud. Like love being the currency, and everyone is rich beyond measure, just throwing armfuls of love into the giant love pile and diving in like those videos of the gleeful dogs diving into the big piles of leaves. And the giddiest ones among us are those who've been least loved before, the lonely, abandoned ones, whose newfound belonging and safety and happiness touches us to our cores and makes us cry and clutch our hearts that are filled to bursting. All the abused animals are there too, frolicking and laughing and licking everyone's face. Doesn't it just make you want to start giving away all your stuff? Amen.